After Jackie is a 2-hour documentary airing on the History Channel this upcoming Saturday, telling the overlooked stories of the Black baseball players who came after Jackie Robinson. Andre Gaines, our producer and director, tells us a little bit about this special. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
75 years after Jackie Robinson. I mean, so many things have changed, yet so many things are the same. Let's talk a little bit about what we're going to see in this documentary.
Sure. So, like you said, we're in the 75th year of Jackie Robinson breaking the color barrier. Something that we're going to see in this documentary is actually the black ball players that actually came before Jackie Robinson, which is something a lot of people don't realize. I mean, this was in the late 1800s, and we get an opportunity on the History Channel to be able to tell these types of stories that there were black ball players like Bud Fowler, Moses Fleetwood Walker. This was in 1884. And really, there was a gentleman's agreement that was instituted in the game amongst the owners to bar black ball players from playing the game, and that would consume the sport for the next 60 years until Jackie Robinson showed up in 1947. And so he was able to, set a wave in motion for a group of black ball players that would come after him, especially after his retirement when he became a civil rights leader. And these three players that we focus on in the film, Bill White, Bob Gibson, Curt Flood, they happen to all play for the Cardinals team, and really tribute to their success as a ball club to their ability to fight against discrimination and inequality.
What were you able to find out as far as the fans of the time or the other teammates of the time, especially during the late 1800s?
Well, what we were able to really discover, and again, I can't take all the credit. I had a whole team of researchers, story producers, editors, and the collaborative art form of film gives us all the opportunity to work together and try to discover these gems and these treasures all together with each other. And I think that what was really astounding were kind of two things. The first being that there were these black ball players, and those were really just two of the prominent names, Bud Fowler and Moses Fleetwood Walker. There were others that were part of the game, and it wasn't until there was the star player at the time, a guy named Cap Anson, who actually said that he wouldn't play any exhibition games if there were black ball players on the field anymore. And so it wasn't a written rule. It was something that was just instituted as a gentleman's agreement, a handshake amongst everyone to bar black ball players from the game. But the other thing too is about the Negro Leagues, really where Jackie Robinson came from and where so many of the other great ball players of the day came from, and how much African Americans love the game of baseball. This was something we really wanted to highlight in the film. This was a huge part of the African American culture and community and neighborhoods. Churches would schedule their services around Negro League games that would be played on Sunday so that they could make sure that they all got there. So we wanted to try to touch upon that a little bit in the film and highlight how much of this was as much of a part of an American pastime, it was part of a Black American pastime as well.
I mean, because Jackie Robinson, 1947, but then we had Ernie Banks for the Chicago Cubs and Minnie Minoso for the White Sox, several years, later. So especially in the Chicagoland area, making a big impact, shortly after Jackie Robinson. But I do want to ask, as far as you becoming a baseball fan and maybe some of the players that impacted you or some of the stories that you learned about maybe at a young age that you wanted to make this, why this documentary is so important to you.
Well, I'm a fan and a student of history. I mean, and the stories that I try to tell really focus on unsung heroes. I mean, my first film was a film called The One and Only Dick Gregory. It was about the comedian who had a huge impact on the world and on society that people weren't aware of, even people who knew him. Well, I think the same is really true with After Jackie. We're talking about Jackie Robinson and the impact that he made. Integrating baseball was probably the least important thing that he actually did. I mean, he was this huge civil rights leader after he retired. And then you have the unsung heroes that came after Jackie Robinson with Bill White, Bob Gibson, and Curt Flood. And they didn't have the cameras on them the same way that Jackie Robinson did. So I was inspired as a storyteller, as a filmmaker. I'm a sports fan. I love any live sports. Grew up loving it, and I think that when I got a chance to really dig into the lives of these ball players and understand baseball as it parallels to the American history that we all know and the parts of it that we don't know, it was an opportunity I just couldn't pass up.
That's amazing. Andre, thank you so much for your time today. Saturday is After Jackie on the History Channel. Go ahead and check it out. And thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much for having me.